This talk dives into the remarkable advancements and significant contributions that have shaped the world of computing as we know it today. This presentation will be augmented or enhanced by many short video clips. The talk will be presented in chronological order. If I skip over a notable contribution, I do apologize, as there have been many contributions to this great field we call computing. Also, if I am mistaken about a particular fact or idea, please feel free to raise your hand and set the record straight. I've done my best to be as accurate as possible. If you have questions at the end, you may raise your hand and we will collectively do our best to answer them. So we will witness how computing has evolved from its ancient origins to the modern digital landscape, shaping the world in unprecedented ways. And before I begin, I would like to shout out a few people. I got my fearless leader, boss over here, Matt Pritchard, if you wouldn't mind standing. Thank you, thank you. And then my mother as well, Paula Elliott. Okay. And back to the talk. So, why should we study the history of computing? Like, what are some benefits? Anyone?
To learn from any mistakes that have been made in the past in computing.
That's a great reason. Anyone else? Sure. What's that? Yes, yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
Because history is awesome.
History is awesome, sometimes. So yes, my reasons are it gives us context on how computers came to be and how they evolved, and will help us understand possibly where they're headed. It also gives us an opportunity to celebrate the perseverance and brilliance of the minds that have fueled the remarkable history of this great space. And let me get some multimedia going. All right, we will start this talk with a remarkable device now called the Antikythera mechanism. The name of this instrument comes from the Greek island Antikythera, where the device was discovered in 1901. The artifact was pulled from a shipwreck and dates back to around 100 BCE. It is believed to have been used to calculate astronomical positions and maybe even to aid in the tracking of the seasons. Let me play you a clip.
Looked at the results, it was astonishing. We've had to rethink the history of technology completely as a result of this single object. It's such a clever, extraordinary, sophisticated machine. Completely shocking for ancient Greece.
"120 years ago, sponge divers discovered a shipwreck off the tiny island of Antikythera in Greece. And what they found changed our understanding of human history forever. Among the treasure trove were marble statues, elegant vases, glistening jewellery and ancient coins, and what looked to be a hunk of corroded metal that no one knew quite what to do with.
It was not recognized at all as being anything interesting when it was discovered. It was just a corroded lump about the size of a large dictionary.
But when, in 1902, it was discovered that there were gear wheels inside it, everyone suddenly got rather excited.
This was the first shock because anything from ancient Greece simply shouldn't have gear wheels. These were precision gears with teeth about 1 millimeter long. And this was just completely shocking.
And the Antikythera mechanism has captured the imagination of archaeologists, mathematicians, and scientists ever since.
It's a dedicated calculating machine, and it uses bronze gear wheels to calculate the cycles of the cosmos being the sun, the moon, the planets, against the stars. You can wind it forward 10 years and you can know where the sun and the moon is going to be and where the planets are going to be.
The question of why the ancient Greeks created such a device has plagued experts since its discovery.
I think it was conceived as a calculating machine that would calculate the theories they had. They had astronomical theories, but could calculate those at the turn of a handle. So it would demonstrate how you could look ahead, say, what's the position of the moon going to be in 5 years' time? You could turn the handle. They'd tell you almost immediately. This is a massive step forward in the history of science and technology. Something we take for granted now, but in those days, the idea that your scientific theories could be mechanized, the predictions could be mechanized, was absolutely astonishing.
Now kept in a museum in Greece, the 2,000-year-old device is split into 82 fragments, and much of it is missing. But in the years since this discovery, modern technology has vastly advanced what we know about the mechanism. In the 1970s, a team X-rayed the device, and the first secrets were revealed. Dozens of cogs hidden within it. But it wasn't until 3D X-ray technology came along that they could separate these gears out.
We took an 8-ton X-ray machine to Athens, installed it in the museum, and we took X-ray data of all the 82 surviving fragments of the mechanism. And when we first looked at the results, it was astonishing because it showed us not only all the gear wheels in 3 dimensions so we could separate them, but it showed us all these new inscriptions in the fragments as well.
A new world of secrets was revealed. A user guide, hidden within the folds of corroded bronze.
This was a wonderful revelation. Out of that data has come nearly all the breakthroughs in recent decades. Came the discovery that it predicted eclipses, that it followed the variable motion of the moon.
Previous experts had been able to model the back of the mechanism up until this point, but these inscriptions helped Tony and his colleagues with their latest model, which focuses on the front of the device.
There's thousands of text characters in ancient Greek which tell us how it worked. It displayed the ancient Greek cosmos, the sun, moon, and planets, in a sort of ring system. It brought back the history of technology to a much earlier time. It is completely astonishing that the ancient Greeks firstly had the conception of making this technology, and secondly, the ability to actually physically make it. We've had to rethink the history of technology completely as a result of this single object. The great Arthur C. Clarke said, if the ancient Greeks had understood the capabilities of the technology they created, then they would have reached the moon within 300 years, and we'd now be exploring the nearest stars.
Now, Tony and his team will take their theoretical model and use ancient Greek techniques to build a physical model of the mechanism. And modern technology may reveal more secrets of the ancient world still.
There were certainly in the ancient world more devices like the Antikythera mechanism. It wasn't unique. I think the only real hope of finding another machine like the Antikythera mechanism is from a shipwreck. The hopeful thing is there are thousands of shipwrecks down there under the Mediterranean, some of them at very deep levels, but the diving technology is advancing so much that it's becoming possible to explore quite deep wrecks. To understand the technological world we live in today, we need to understand its history. What the Antikythera mechanism tells us is that that history is different than what we thought, that it started earlier, that it's developed in this incredible flourishing of this sophisticated technology, and then it seemed to go backwards. We kind of take it for granted, I think, in the modern world that technology will just keep on advancing. But throughout history, this hasn't always been the case. The history of technological development doesn't go in a straight line. It develops in fits and starts and sometimes gets lost and forgotten.
So the Antikythera mechanism is an incredible analog computing device that has changed our understanding of the history of computers. In order to talk more about the history of computing, we should examine and highlight the people who made computing and modern computers possible. The fascinating individuals who helped usher in modern computing should be celebrated for their achievements and innovative thinking. This here is a picture of Charles Babbage, and we will first remark on him. He was an 18th century mathematician, and he was an eccentric genius. Babbage was born in England in 1791 during the Industrial Revolution. Babbage is considered today as a Da Vinci man, which is a man that has lots of great ideas. He was well educated in mathematics and science, and his most notable contributions were the difference engine and the analytical engine. This is a picture of the difference engine. And the difference engine is an automatic mechanical calculator designed to tabulate polynomial functions such as quadratic equations, which can be used to calculate the areas of enclosed space, the speed of an object, and many other things. So functions like this is what it could calculate. Before he completed the difference engine, he dreamed up of an even more ambitious device, which is called the analytical engine, which he proposed would be a more advanced, steam-powered, general-purpose computer that would use punch cards for input and output. The analytical engine was never built, but many aspects of its design were recorded in immaculate detail in Babbage's drawings and mechanical notation. Although the difference engine was partially built, he never got to see either device fully realized or created.
Charles Babbage was the only child of a tyrannical London banker, a bully at home. But his money kept his son and heir financially comfortable for life. Cambridge educated in mathematics and supremely self-possessed, Charles became an iconoclastic writer and habitual inventor. In 1832, the drawing room of his London home became a showcase for demonstrations of a small section of his difference engine, a far from finished device by which he intended to revolutionize calculation by mechanizing it. At his soirees, London's intellectual society watched what you see now. As Babbage cranked its handle, this machine produced a series of polynomial calculations that were repeatable and error-free. Most astonishing, it was automatic. Any of his illustrious guests might have operated the handle as well as Charles Babbage, perhaps the geologist Charles Lyell, or Charles Darwin, or Charles Dickens. Once set, the machine seemed able to proceed, to think on its own. But what was called the beautiful fragment of the machine Babbage had intended to build was all he ever finished of it. In fact, his imagination had already moved on to an even more ambitious mechanism, one that would make obsolete the abandoned machine. The analytical engine would be a general-purpose calculating automaton. For most of 30 years, he would revise and improve his notional design. Only a few partial sections of it were built, this one after Babbage's death by his son. The analytical engine was an ever-evolving machine. Each breakthrough elegantly drawn up, annotated to describe mechanical motions with a coding system that Babbage claimed was his finest invention. The analytical engine may be the most intricate operating mechanism ever fully realized with paper and imagination alone. In 1846, Babbage abruptly changed course. As if determined to make good on an old obligation, he worked for 2 years to complete a full set of drawings for difference engine number 2. It would require 8,000 parts, only a third as many as the first. He offered it to the government, but did not protest when it declined to build it, and the drawings were carefully put away. Eventually, they came from the Babbage estate to rest in the library of the Science Museum in London. More than 130 years later, in 1985, the museum's new curator of computing, Doran Swade, became convinced the institution could build Difference Engine No. 2. After all, with the intact drawings, it seemed feasible and within financial reach. It took 17 years and drama to rival Babbage's so long ago. And it works, just as Babbage designed it. Every turn of the engine's driving handle is carried through gears, cams, rods, levers, and springs to release and arrest precisely aligned number wheels. A helical arrangement of steel fingers continually pulls the register towers to find and perform the carrying of tens. In its continuing sweep upward, it is mesmerizing. The intricate printing section can be programmed for 1, 2, or 3 column output, for 2 font sizes at once, for variable margins and column gaps, even word wrap where necessary. It prints hard copy on paper and simultaneously impresses the same output into a tray of plaster to produce a stereotype, a mold for casting a full-page printing plate. When a tray is full, the printer pauses the entire machine. In the spring of 2008, a clone of DE2 commissioned by Nathan Myhrvold was completed at the Science Museum and shipped to California. At the Computer History Museum, it would charm new thousands of discerning eyes. Today, the crotchety proud genius, who never managed to prove it during his lifetime, has a fair claim to honor as a pioneer in the history of intelligent machines, just as his parlor guests in 1832 suggested. His Difference Engine continues to inspire the admiration of his intellectual heirs, a celebrated and unique icon to chroniclers of computing. Charles Babbage, remember, never saw it, except in his stubborn, prescient dreams.
You can't really mention Babbage without speaking about Ada Lovelace. Lovelace was the only legitimate child of the famous poet Lord Byron. Ada was well educated in mathematics and was decades younger than Babbage, but she was inspired by the prototype of the Difference Engine that we just saw and became Babbage's lifelong friend. Ada created notes on Babbage's proposed analytical engine, and in her notes, some argue she created the first computer algorithms. Some people claim that she is the world's first computer programmer.
Augustus Ada King, Countess of Lovelace, was an English mathematician and writer, chiefly known for her work on Charles Babbage's proposed mechanical general-purpose computer, the analytical engine. She was the first person to recognise that the machine could be applied to tasks beyond pure calculation. Her work on this led her to publish the first algorithm intended to be carried out by such a machine, and as a result, she is sometimes regarded as the first to recognise the full potential of a computing machine and one of the first computer programmers. Ada Lovelace was born in 1815. She was the only legitimate child of poet Lord Byron and his wife Lady Byron. He died of disease when Ada was only 8 years old, and her mother promoted Ada's interest in mathematics and logic to prevent her from developing her father's perceived insanity. Although often ill in her childhood, Ada was a keen student who loved her work. At the age of 20, she married William King in 1835. King was made Earl of Lovelace in 1838, meaning Ada became the Countess of Lovelace. Her bright intellect and deftly managed social life brought her into contact with scientists such as Andrew Cross, Charles Babbage, Sir David Brewster, Charles Wheaston, and Michael Faraday, contacts who she used to further her education. Ada described her approach to science as poetical. Her mathematical talents led her to a long working relationship and friendship with fellow British mathematician Charles Babbage. She was particularly interested in Babbage's work on the analytical engine. Between 1842 and 1843, Ada translated an article from an Italian engineer on Babbage's calculating machine, supplementing it with an elaborate set of her own notes. These notes contain what many consider to be the first computer program, that is, an algorithm designed to be carried out by a machine. Sadly, her work was cut short, as Ada died of cancer in 1852 at the age of 36. Lovelace's notes are important in the early history of computers. She developed a vision of the capability of computers to go beyond mere calculation, while many others, including Babbage himself, focused only on those capabilities. Her mindset of poetical science led her to ask questions about the analytical engine and examined how individuals and society relate to technology as a collaborative tool.
So that's Ada Lovelace, as we just saw. And this here is Herman Hollerith, who in 1889 created a calculating census machine for the company TMC, which later became IBM. And I've got a short clip on him as well.
Let's see. This is a Hollerith census machine. Herman Hollerith, the man who came up with a better way of doing things, made some money, but is mostly forgotten today. What is the Hollerith machine? Well, it has to do with the American Constitution's requirement to take a census every 10 years. Starting in 1790, every 10 years, the American government has taken a census. The next one will be 2010. Everything was counted: horses, dogs, sheep, cattle, pigs, how many wagons you owned, if you were a railroad, how many engines, if you were a ship owner, how many ships you owned, anything and everything of statistical interest for economic purposes for government planning. What you see here is an 1890 machine used in the 1890 census, a better way of focusing, calculating, organizing the information. In 1880, the American census took about 5 years to collect all the data. It took another 4.5 years to complete the census. If you hadn't had the Hollerith machine for the 1890 census, it wouldn't have been complete in 10 years. These machines revolutionized large-scale information handling. The 1890 census took about the same time as the 1880 census, even though there were 16 million more people. What did it do? It provided a more organized way and a faster way of processing information. A large data sheet would be marked. It was organized into a matrix. The matrix in turn would be processed so that a punched card could be used. How was the card punched? A machine like this one, an operator would take a look at the data sheet, place a card in here. If there was a mark on the sheet, it would push down, punch a hole in the card. Then you'd take the card and you'd put it in a reader. 80 spring-loaded pins electrically connected to the counters on the machine above. You put the card underneath, press it down, there was a bed of mercury underneath. Mercury is a liquid metal that provided the ground for the electrical circuit. If there was a hole, pin went through, completed the circuit, and the counter would advance. Each counter number being part of the information being collected. Lift the handle up. Where do you put the card? This is an organizer, a sorter, if you will. Pop up because of an electromagnet relay. The operator would take the card and stick it in the box that was open. No decisions had to be made. Simply put the card in, press the handle down, lift the handle up, put the card into the open box. Was it good? 16 million more people in 1890. The census was complete in 6.5 years, 4 years earlier than the 1880 census.
So that gentleman in the clip there was a representative of the Computer History Museum in Mountain View, California. Has anyone been to that? Very cool. It's a cool place. The next big contributor to computing we should mention is Alan Turing, who was also brilliant in mathematics, like the aforementioned people. Most of you are likely aware of the prestigious Turing Award named after him that is given annually to computer scientists who make breakthroughs in the field. It is one of, if not the highest honor you can earn in the field of computing, and rightfully so, as Alan Turing is considered the father of computer science. He made contributions to the field of AI as well by detailing a procedure later known as the Turing test, which determined whether a machine could imitate human conversations. We have a clip on Turing.
Of the 20th century.
Turing was a mathematician, cryptographer, and pioneer of computer science, whose life was one of secret triumphs shadowed by public tragedy. Perhaps known today for his part in breaking the German Enigma code during World War II, Turing was by that time already established as a mathematician of extraordinary capability. Born on the 23rd of June 1912, Turing spent his childhood split between Hastings in Kent and Sherborne in Dorset, displaying a precocious talent at school for maths and science, including condensing Einstein's theory of relativity for his mum at the age of 15. Turing's abilities led him to receiving a scholarship at King's College, Cambridge.
He arrived here to study as an undergraduate in 1931. Like many great minds, Turing was never happier than when he had a problem to solve. And in keeping with the exceptional skill and ambition he had already displayed, he turned his attentions to the decision problem, or Entscheidungsproblem in German.
Laid out by the legendary German mathematician David Hilbert at the turn of the century, the problem was one of the most important unsolved mathematical challenges for the 20th century. It was here in the spring of 1935, by the flow of the River Cam at Grantchester Meadows in Cambridge, that Turing decided to take on the giants of mathematics at the time. Turing conceived of a hypothetical machine that reads symbols on a strip of tape, rewriting or deleting them based on a finite set of rules. In fact, originally, Turing described a person slavishly performing these operations. He called this person the computer. Given a problem to compute, this machine would either stop and give you the answer, or run forever if the answer doesn't exist. Turing mathematically proved that you can never know if and when the machine will stop. He did this by creating the definitive example of the undecidable problem, an astounding feat that disproved Hilbert's question of decidability, showing that dark areas in mathematics will always remain a barrier to complete truth.
The imagined Turing machine model went on to become one of the cornerstones of computer science, and is arguably one of the most influential mathematical abstractions of the 20th century. And Turing was only 22.
Returning to Cambridge following time at Princeton, Turing began working for the Government Code and Cipher School, the UK's codebreakers.
For many years before the Second World War, the German military had been using a cipher machine called Enigma to encrypt their secret messages.
About the size of a typewriter, an Enigma machine has a second set of letters that light up, called the lamp board. If you press a letter on the keyboard, the machine generates a different letter to represent it on the lamp board, creating the code. The standard Enigma machine had over 150 million possible daily settings. Inside an Enigma are 3 rotors, which turn after pressing a key, making the wires of the circuit rotate, thus changing the circuit completely. So pressing the same letter will generate a different result. Double letters, for example, may not become double letters in the code. Enigma posed a formidable challenge for the Allied codebreakers. Code breaking is a battle of mathematical wits and cunning, and during wartime, the stakes are high. Turing relished such challenges. A day after the UK declared war with Germany, he reported to Bletchley Park for work on breaking the German Enigma cipher. Turing's contribution to the codebreakers was quite simply vital to the war effort. Not only did he make the first breakthroughs with the naval Enigma code, allowing Britain's food and supplies to be shipped across the Atlantic, but along with Gordon Welchman, he designed a machine to smash the German Enigma code, called the bomb, named for an earlier Polish code-breaking machine. By using the fact that the German codes often contained a common phrase, such as those found in weather reports, the codebreakers would try and guess a short phrase or crib that might appear in an Enigma message. They would input this guess into the bomb, designed to perform a sweep of the myriad ways in which an Enigma machine could have been set up. By using the principle of contradiction, combined with extraordinary mathematical insight, the codes were eroded and eventually cracked. On a good day, the bomb machine could find an Enigma setting in 15 minutes.
In 1945, Turing received an OBE for services to the Foreign Office, though the real reason for this honour remained top secret for another 30 years, long past Turing's death.
Today, historians believe that the work of the codebreakers shortened the war by 2 years, and in doing so, saved countless lives. Following the war, Turing went on to work at the University of Manchester and continued to make hugely significant contributions to computing and later biology, until his death in 1954. He is credited with laying the foundations for computer technology and artificial intelligence, and worked on the first recognisable modern computers.
In September 2009, 55 years after his death, the British government made a public apology to Alan Turing.
Turing was gay at a time when it was illegal to be gay. On discovering the truth about his sexuality, the authorities forced Turing to endure horrific hormone treatment. He was labelled as a security risk, and he lost his job as a codebreaker. In the end, Turing committed suicide by biting from an apple laced with cyanide, a desperately sad end to the life of a genius.
Today, we live in a world dominated by computer technology.
From cars to smartphones, desktops to rockets, life in the 21st century is almost unimaginable without computers.
They facilitate our existence. For Alan Turing, hero of Bletchley Park and father of computer science, this was never the aim, or even the point. He cared about filling the gaps in our knowledge, about finding the light, the truth, the solution to the problems.
So that was Alan Turing. Next up on our list of notable contributors is this man here. He is also a genius in mathematics, surprise, surprise. His name is John von Neumann. He is considered by many to be one of the brightest minds to ever live. He had around 125 major scientific innovations, including developing the modern computer architecture. He also came up with the theory of game theory, which is used in all kinds of applications, including poker and war strategies, and much more. He also contributed to the atomic bomb project. His name is not well known to the general public, but his contributions to computing were enormous. And this here is Grace Hopper. She's our next contributor, and she is considered to be the grandmother of computer programming. Again, a mathematician who served in the U.S. Navy, Rear Admiral Grace Hopper is credited as developing the first compiler used in computer programming. Compilers, for those who are unaware, convert English syntax into obscure machine code that the computer can understand and execute. This contribution was game-changing because it made it much easier to, 1, learn to code, and 2, quickly write and debug code without as many errors. She is considered to be the first hacker in history, and she also designed the programming language COBOL. I believe I have a clip of her.
Grace Murray Hopper, the grandmother of computer programming, was born on December 9, 1906. She attended Vassar College, graduating in 1928 with a degree in math and physics. After graduating, she accepted a position as an assistant professor at Vassar, which would help her pay her way through Yale, where she received both a master's and a PhD in mathematics. Satisfied with 3 math degrees under her belt, Hopper went back to Vassar, now as a full-time professor. She spent the next 10 years molding young minds. And then World War II broke out. Hopper wanted to do her part in the war effort, so she applied for the WAVES program, which stood for Women Accepted for Volunteer Emergency Service. It was basically the first program that expanded women's wartime roles beyond nursing and administrative duties. And in 1943, she was accepted to WAVES and joined the U.S. Naval Reserve. She was then assigned to work on the MARC series of computers at Harvard. The Mark I was one of the first electromechanical computers used in war efforts and the first of its kind produced in the United States. While working on the Mark II, Hopper discovered an unusual glitch. One day, the computer inexplicably shorted out due to a moth stuck in the hardware. The bug was removed, and Hopper referred to this solution as debugging the computer. Finally, in 1952, she revolutionized computer programming as we know it. She and her team invented the first compiler, a program that converted common sense commands into binary computer language. This blew the doors off computer programming. Every subsequent programming language is built on her work, and it's no exaggeration to say that we owe computer programming as we know it to Hopper. At 60, Hopper retired from the Navy with more than 2 decades of naval service under her belt. But her retirement didn't last long. Less than a year later, Uncle Sam came calling again, asking her to come back to standardize COBOL for the Navy. Always the dutiful patriot, Hopper returned to active service for another 20 years. Grace Hopper died on January 1st, 1992. In her later life, when asked what her greatest accomplishment was, Hopper was known to respond, "All of the young people I've trained."
So yet another honorable mention. This isn't a person, this is a computing device. These are timeshare computers, and they were first proposed in the 1950s, and they were realized in the 1960s. The design was composed of a large central computer in the center there that could be accessed via terminals, and the first one was initiated in 1959 by John McCarthy at MIT. And these 2 gentlemen here, Dennis Ritchie and Ken Thompson, developed the Unix operating system. And they did this in 1971, and they were employees of AT&T Bell Labs. Bell Labs was a research center for AT&T, and a lot of cool inventions were concocted there. It's known as the Idea Factory. A lot of influential people worked at Bell Labs, including William Shockley, who headed the team that developed the first transistor, and Claude Elwood Shannon, who conceived the foundations for information theory, which is the mathematical study of quantification, storage, and communication of information. Also invented at Bell Labs was the C programming language, which was developed by Dennis Ritchie, one of the inventors of Unix, the guy on the right. And yes, and the C is considered to be the mother of all modern programming languages, as most programming languages today are derived from C. And let's see. And then here, this is Bell Labs' website, and you can go here, and they have a little bit of information on the different things that they've created here. So if I can get to the right arrow, thank you. Unix was created here. This satellite, the laser in 1958, the solar cell in 1954, information theory, 1948, the cellular concept, 1947, the transistor, 1947, television transmission, 1927, sound motion pictures, 1926. So there was a lot of things that came out of Bell Labs. It was a hotbed for very, very cool technology. And let's see. Pictured here is the Intel 4004. It's the first commercially available microchip. And that was invented in 1971, and it's contrasted on the right there with a more modern Intel chip. And so we've come a long way in that amount of time. Next is the invention of the Altair 8800. This was a microcomputer designed in 1974 by a company called MITS and based on the Intel 8080 CPU. Interest grew quickly after it was featured on the cover of the January 1975 issue of Popular Electronics. It was sold by mail order through advertisements. This is considered to be the first mini computer kit to rival commercial offerings. This is what, well, let me don't skip ahead. Let's see. This here are pictures of Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. Most people are familiar with these two. They created Apple in 1976, and they released the first Apple computer, I believe, that same year. This is a picture of Bill Gates and Paul Allen. They created DOS and Windows in the company Microsoft. And they created DOS in 1981 and Windows in 1985. Bill Gates and Paul Allen programmed the Altair 8080, and they wrote an interpreter BASIC for it, and that's really what helped popularize the personal computer. This gentleman here is Richard Stallman. He started the GNU project in 1983. The GNU project was a project that wanted to take Unix, which was a commercial operating system, closed source. He wanted to develop Unix-like applications for free, or for open source purposes. And so he started this GNU project in 1983. He had lots of contributors, and the only thing was missing was a kernel to run the whole operating system. This man here, Linus Torvalds, in 1991, created the Linux kernel, which was the last piece of the GNU project, and thus Linux was born. Yay, Linux. And that is the end of the talk. I had planned on talking about smartphones and wearable technology, but I believe we all have a pretty good understanding of that recent history. And so with that, I'll wrap up. I hope you found this history of computing as interesting as I do. And are there any questions?
Big hand for Ken. All right, I will be running around with the mic, and I will just remind folks that if you are streaming, please do ask questions in the main stage channel on the OLF Slack, and I'll monitor there as well. Please share your name and then your question.
Sure, my name is Jimmy. One of the things I've heard, and I don't know if this is a rumor or not, so maybe I'm spreading a rumor, but it's a question at this point, was that at the Bell Labs time, when Unix and C were being developed, specifically AT&T, who owned Bell Labs, was under the monopoly, and then in the early 80s they would be broken up. But at the time, they were directed to not sell these things because they were concerned about their monopoly position. And so they shared a lot of C and Unix source code with universities like UCal Berkeley and those sort of places. And that, in some ways, is kind of a lot of the birth of open source because they couldn't sell it, is my understanding. I don't know if you confirm that or any knowledge of that?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the case there. That's awesome.
It's not necessarily a question, but an addendum. Oh, I'm sorry. My name's Gage. I actually took, when I went to go change my name, I actually took Grace Hopper's last name. But one of the things that I learned after I got out of high school, because there was a guy that wrote an entire book about this, but IBM had a German sort of outpost back during World War II. And one of the things that I thought was pretty interesting when going through IBM's history is that the Hollerith machines, they were here in the States as well, but the Nazis actually contracted IBM to build custom Hollerith machines for the concentration camps. And so in high school, they taught us that, they had tattooed numbers on the Jews' arms, but they didn't really go into that. And it was IBM's fault, it was described by the author of the book as all IBM had to do was stop supplying Hollerith cards. They were like shotgun shells, right? If IBM would have stopped supplying them, a lot of lives would have been saved.
Yeah, that's unfortunate that that technology got used in that manner.
My name is Phil. I just wanted to relate an anecdote that I heard about Grace Hopper in the 80s. A coworker of mine attended a talk that Hopper gave, and during her talk, the question came up: how much longer do you think COBOL, the language, is going to be around? And her reply was, "We didn't think it would be around this long." And of course, it's still here with us today.
Turning more into an open mic session instead of a Q&A session.
It's all good.
I'll ask a real question. Hi, Rick Wills. You tell a very elegant story. I thought it was very, very well put together.
Thank you.
You start with, 2,000 years ago with the Astrogate, and then you jump to the middle of the Industrial Revolution. What changed from, say, you had Ada Lovelace and Babbage, and then boom, suddenly things in the 1880s, 90s start taking off, and then zoom right through the entire 20th century. What's your opinion of what changed? What drove all that, and then hit the 1990s, and boom, suddenly PCs are here. So what how would you describe that? What changed?
I would think things like the Industrial Revolution, the steam-powered technology, and then maybe like manufacturing, like the tolerances with the machines and the metals and stuff to build the intricate machinery. I would think that was a big contributing factor.
In all your research for this talk here, how many email threads did you find talking about GNU Herd in comparison to the Linux kernel, and how the Linux kernel is going to be outdated in favor of GNU Herd in the realm of eventually? Which, by the way, you can actually boot Debian right now with the GNU Herd kernel.
Nice.
My name's Bennett. I'm just wondering, where can I learn COBOL? I've been interested in it for years, and I can't find a class on it.
Some universities brought it back, believe it or not.
I don't know anything about programming, so a little preface here. It might sound like a dumb question. Huh? Your name? Oh, yeah. My name's Thomas. But what I was going to ask is between, and I know this is probably like comparing apples to oranges or whatever, but between COBOL and C, which would you say gets the better optimization at the end of the day? I don't know. I'm just wondering, any programmers out there? C? Oh, okay.
Anyone else while I check our internet friends? We see you, internet friends. You are very quiet. That's not how the internet normally works. Anyone else in the audience?
I'm Kite, and I guess my question to you is just, I guess out of everyone that you talked about, like, kind of for us in like modern 24th century and at this conference, if there's anyone you want to pick that you think would be like the most significant that we should be aware of right now, or maybe like you said, because I know a lot of these people are lesser known or we just forget about them.
Yeah, it's hard to pick one, like the biggest influential person, but if I had to choose someone, it probably would be Alan Turing or maybe John von Neumann, but they all made significant contributions.
Is that kind of related because we're in like this AI phase too now, or would you say, or just wondering what your reasoning is?
They were just wicked smart.
Just wicked.
Right? Like wicked smart.
My name is Zach. So, starting from the very beginning of your talk all the way through, it's been like this exponential ramp of technology for the last 1,000, 2,000 years. And at every point, everyone was looking and saying, we're like at the pinnacle of society. And this technology is really amazing. And what they looked at afterwards, they never ever could have imagined. It was like so much greater than they ever could have imagined. And right now we're sitting on this edge of so much computation with artificial intelligence. What's next?
I'm probably the wrong one to ask.
Moore's Law is still in effect.
Yes.
Anything more to add, Ken?
Nope.
All right, big hand for Ken.
Thanks, everyone.